back to the show. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm here with Sky Jatani.
Hello, Phil. Happy birthday.
What?
Yes.
It's my birthday?
I'm declaring
That's what
that.
I heard.
Why didn't somebody tell me?
Happy birthday.
I would have worn my...
It's your birthday.
I would have worn my
hats.
birthday
It's
suit.
your
And the
birthday. You
streamers.
can cry if you want to, but don't do it on the podcast.
It is my birthday. I'm officially old enough to know better.
And he's 48. I can tell you that.
I was trying to hide
We
my
just
age.
lost a huge chunk of our audience that didn't realize
But
how
he's
old Phil
older
is.
than me.
And Christian
For 6
Taylor.
months. Hi, everybody. Hi, Phil.
You're green.
I know. Why do you always comment about what color I am?
Because you are the color on
I
the
am.
show.
I'm the color.
Yeah.
You are the color.
I've got navy blue. That's a
That's
color.
a change for you.
Yeah.
You are the
I want
color.
you to wear your Superman t-shirt one day.
You know,
With
I
your
haven't-
red tennis
I have a
shoes.
couple of them, and they're getting a little raggedy. I need some new.
Okay, well, I'm going to sing the theme song anyway.
Go ahead.
As who? Let's see. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast, so there's no video. Hey, but there is. I always forget that. Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky
Hi.
and Christian too,
Hello, boys and girls.
and maybe a guest, except we don't have one here for you. We don't need guests because I got about 7 of them in my head. Hey, it's a podcast, so lend an ear. The Phil Vischer
Ain't
podcast
that
starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
Awesome.
I never actually hit the note I was aiming for, but that's okay. You know, you do what you can.
Keeps it interesting,
You do,
keeps us on our
You do
toes.
what you can, and then you let it go. You know?
That
you
is
don't,
true.
You don't beat yourself up about it. You say, I tried to hit the note. I tried to find the right fret.
I wondered how you
That is
dealt
a
with that.
slacker's point of view.
I failed. I move on. It's okay. It's okay.
So you just spread your failure around. That's all.
yeah.
Actually,
well, I put
you
it
know,
on the internet.
I think that's kind of inspiring.
yeah. It's an example to children everywhere
To not reach your dreams.
that you don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
You don't have to stick the landing, Sky. You
To
don't
be
have
valuable.
to stick the landing to have had fun twirling through the air.
Exactly. I'm with him on this one.
I'm just egging him on.
I did not. Speaking of not sticking the landing, last week we were talking about modesty in women,
Yes, we were. And I made some people kind of cranky.
and a couple of people were actually talking. It was our story on sexual assault, and Christian made the point that women need to know what they do to men and maybe dress a little more modestly. And some people didn't like that because it implies that it's their fault.
Right.
It is interesting, and that comes up online quite often. Really, if anyone makes the argument that it would be nice if women didn't act so sexually, it immediately raises, oh, so you're saying it's their fault, and it's not the guy who had jumped on her. It's not his fault. And what did you want to clarify?
Yeah, I want to clarify that I in no way meant to imply that men don't bear full responsibility. And I would venture to say there is sexual assault the other way. It can happen both ways. And it is never...
That's why I dress this way, because I just want to make sure that I'm not tempting any
I don't go out in public without my burqa.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it just has 2 eye holes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's... Oh, no, I was going to say it's white. That would be a ghost.
No, that would not be a ghost. That would
It
be.
does not have a pointy hat, though. Without a pointy hat.
All right.
White, round head ghost. White, pointy hat, something very different.
Very different.
Very different.
Like Boo Berry.
Boo Berry is a ghost. You're right.
Or Casper.
But he's not white.
You could
Boo
be...
Berry is blue.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
He is.
he's the world's only blue ghost.
We'll
Okay,
go-
so
we'll
what
go
was
with
it that you
Casper.
wanted to say?
Yeah, so I was in no way implying that, rape is not the full and complete responsibility of the perpetrator, because it is. I was really coming from a more pro-modesty standpoint, that I feel like our society, number one, is, really gone to the...
So anything goes.
Exactly. And I do think there's an education thing not happening with the younger girls where they aren't cognizant of how what they wear affects other people. Even me, if somebody comes up and wearing a very low-cut shirt and is hanging out, what am I going
guy.
to... Your eyes are drawn to this, what you don't
But
normally
isn't that
see.
the point?
Yeah,
It
Isn't that
is.
the point?
People are trying to draw attention to the way they look by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember there was a movie where the guys started wearing jeans with clear plastic panels on each butt cheek?
No.
No.
I don't know what kind of movies you're
What
watching.
movie is that?
It was a
That sounds like something
You know what
like
that's called?
I forget what it was called.
That's called the glass bottom.
Oh, that's
Glass bottom pants.
You are so quick.
That's cute.
That is awesome.
That's cute. And it was kind of a reverse.
Actually, I wouldn't think it would be so cute.
No, it wasn't so cute,
I would think
especially
it
if
would be
they're
gross.
hairy.
Yeah.
Hairy-butted.
Ugh.
Hairy-butted gentlemen should not wear glass-bottom pants. I had a fortune cookie that said that once. Hairy-butted gentlemen should not wear glass-bottom pants.
And talk show hosts should not use...
Thank you. Oh, I can be Irish, I can be German, but I can't be Asian. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm just going to let those comments come on in on Facebook.
Like you've never done an Asian accent.
Not in public.
Anyway.
Define public.
Did I make my point clear?
Yeah, you made your point clear. And I kind of wanted to, I felt like jumping in, but then I thought better. But
You didn't want to
but I
come to my
still-
defense?
I did. And here's my point, because I think it's kind of nuts when, once a year there's a parade of topless women in Central Park, New York,
Right.
to protest that women aren't allowed to be topless. Because we've cut there. It's true. Even though legally you can be topless in Central Park in New York, it's not against the law. You can actually.
What are they protesting?
The general nationwide resistance to topless women.
Even though...
How many men are actually resistant to the idea of topless women?
there's... As my friend Andy Crouch has said, clothing is a great gift from God. Because 90-some% of people look better with clothing on.
That is true. But we forget that because the only people we put into visual representation are the half
Perfect
of 1%.
people. Right.
Yeah.
Are the genetically aberrational. Is that a word? Aboriginal? The genetically
Aberrational.
aboriginal.
You mean aberrational?
So the point that I wanted to make is that I think we forget that female sexuality is basically a drug for males. It actually has a biological,
It does.
Either evolutionary or God-designed or both purpose
Right.
of drawing men. And,
Right.
and that's kind of what it's for. That's why female deer do what they do and birds do. I mean, everyone has...
Are we having the birds and the bees
Yeah,
talk here?
we're having the birds and the deer. Birds do it, deer do it.
Is this your next children's book?
No, it's not.
Is this something we're supposed to know
I
about?
like Everybody Poops. You ever read that book?
Yes, I love that
That's a good
book.
book. But that's a different story. That's not our topic for today. So, if you don't believe that female sexuality is like a drug, just go to a magazine rack.
Right.
Because it's the only drug that you can print. You can't print cocaine. You can't print marijuana. You can print female sexuality.
Obviously, sex sells, and that's as old as human civilization.
Isn't that proof then that female sexuality is a drug? So then here's the issue. If someone is addicted to cocaine, is it their fault if they use cocaine? Well, yes. Should you leave them in a hotel room with a pile of cocaine next to their bed and expect them to avoid it? No. And it's kind of the same thing with sexuality in a sense that if someone is going to react very strongly to a sexual display, isn't it a kindness to not present a sexual display?
This was one of the things that I kept thinking is, I learned this somewhere in history in my past that,
The American Revolution?
It could have been. Our freedoms extend as far as until they bump up against someone else's.
My freedom extends to the end of your nose. I believe it's been said.
Okay. So, yeah.
I can swing my arm as much as I want until I hit your nose.
Right. And so I do think there is a responsibility, a consideration. When I work a lot with high school girls, and when I have this conversation with them, for example, recently I had one where she said her twin brother and her dad were always telling her she can't go outside wearing the clothes that she wanted to wear. And I asked her, do you know why they're telling you that? And she looked at me, kind of quizzically, very questioning. And I said, and I explained it. I explained they're wanting you to be modest because they want to protect you and they know what other guys are thinking.
Right.
And they don't like that.
Right. But those guys should be able to control themselves.
So,
yes, they should.
They should.
But that doesn't mean you don't lock your car just because people should not steal cars, right? Is this making any sense, Sky?
I think it is. I think another way of simply summarizing it is men, boys, whoever, have the responsibility to act appropriately toward women and should be fully culpable if they don't.
Absolutely.
Period. Full stop.
Yes. Yeah.
Women, as a way of loving their male neighbors, brothers in Christ, should
the
also
weaker vessel in this
should also
argument.
take responsibility for dressing appropriately and moderately,
Right.
as a way of respecting the weaknesses of the others that they are around. Period. Full stop.
I think when you do understand, and I only began to understand this when I was married and got to understand my own boys and how they think and what were triggers for them. And I began feeling sort of their struggle.
Yeah.
And so I just, as the more I understood the male mindset and the way they're made physically, chemically, all of that, the more I realized it would be helpful and considerate and a loving thing to be modest.
Right.
So that's all I mean.
Okay. Also, last week we talked about, we were talking about sexual assault on college campuses, and I made the bold declaration that it isn't nearly the problem on Christian college campuses, which I acknowledge I don't actually have data for. That doesn't mean
What's
you can't
new about that?
You can't draw conclusions just because you have no data. Except that I've gone to a Christian college. I live right next to a Christian college. My mother has taught at a Christian college for 15 years and was the dean of women at the Christian college. So I have some insight.
And you've played a Christian college on TV.
I've played a Christian college on TV. I do chapel at many Christian colleges. I have a lot of exposure to Christian colleges.
And you've never been sexually assaulted there
I have never once been sexually assaulted, even when I wore my glass-bottom pants at a Christian college. People just prayed for me. See, and I appreciated that. I appreciated that. So my point being, I don't think, I'm fairly certain I would know if it was, because basically what Time Magazine said is the current study is that 1 out of 5 women will be sexually assaulted in their 4 years of college in the U.S. 1 out of 5. I don't think it's anywhere near that in Christian colleges. And someone said, oh, yeah, well, just Google it, and then you'll see all the stories and all the data, which I did. I Googled it. There are a few stories, but they're anecdotal. It
happens.
It does. I didn't say it didn't happen. There was a sexual assault at Pensacola Bible College, and and typically the stories though aren't about the number of sexual assaults. They're about the fact that the faculty isn't very good at handling them.
Right.
They're partly because they're so unaccustomed to it, partly because there are these strict moral codes there. And if, obviously, if the girl is in some of those situations, they're suspicious that she was involved and that it maybe was consensual and that who's lying, and they get into all that. And so there are cases where Christian colleges have had sexual assaults and have handled them poorly and said, well, what were you wearing? And, stupid things like that you don't ask a victim of sexual assault. So those are the stories. There aren't stories about frequency, and there doesn't appear to be a lot of frequency. And if for no other reason to say it's significantly less of an issue at Christian colleges, according to Time Magazine, 3/4 of the rapes on college campuses involve alcohol. So the girl is drunk. Okay, alcohol is against the rules at Christian colleges. You take a vow saying you will get kicked out if you have alcohol. So not that no one ever drinks at a Christian college, but it's not accepted, and it will actually get you kicked out. So it's much more rare. And because alcohol is much more rare, intoxication is much more rare, and that's the #1 contributor to sexual assault. Well,
and I will say the waters do get muddied, I think, because I bet you my guess is there is less reporting of those things. Perhaps on Christian campuses, and because I think it's more confusing. There is a lot of, I think, misunderstanding or bearing the responsibility or something like that. My guess is they're not reported as much either.
Yeah.
So that's why there's not a lot of statistics.
But I agree with you, and I also agree with you. My hunch is that if you were to poll women at Christian colleges and universities, I'd be surprised if 20% of them said that they were sexually assaulted there.
Yeah. I would be surprised.
It does not surprise me about a state university.
I'd be surprised if 5% of them said that. Yeah. Anyway, there was This American Life, they did a special on Penn State University a couple of years ago because it was voted the #1 party school in America. So they sent reporters there to try to figure out What does that mean? What does it look like? And how did it get this way? You know, and they interviewed faculty. And they talked about, they actually interviewed girls on their way to parties on Friday night on campus. And they interviewed 3 or 4 girls, and they were freshmen. So they actually said the majority of the assaults happened to the youngest girls who haven't figured out how to stay safe yet. And every Friday night, they said they would get dressed up in what they referred to as their slutty clothes. That's what the girls called them. We put on these clothes, and then we try to go get into parties. And the plan is to get drunk. So you kind of, and so even the fairly hip liberal reporters at This American Life are saying, wow, that's really not a good idea.
Yeah, that's really stupid.
Why are you and they also pointed that the store on campus that sells everybody's favorite beer because it's the cheapest has a big display right by the front door. There's a rack right by the front door, which is condoms, KY jelly, and pregnancy tests.
Wow.
That's the first thing you see when you come in the front door.
That's kind of nauseating.
It is. And these, fairly liberal reporters are kind of looking at this saying, this is kind of nauseating.
Well, I got to tell you, the very first week I was on campus as a freshman at a large state university, they take freshmen through all kinds of training. I mean, from the...
What are you trained in? Like how to open your locker? Because I had a hard time with that in 7th grade.
It's how to use a condom. And it's how to...
Oh, that kind of training.
Yeah, that kind of training. Like hands-on training.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. Everyone had to go.
Required?
Required.
What? Oh, nice.
We have a call.
Nice. Yeah, it's
Someone's
your
calling
university.
the show.
Hey,
It's
Taco
university
was calling.
saying,
We'll take questions after the show is
away
over.
And then they had all kinds of awareness about sexual assault, rape, girls, not walking by themselves, just all the kind of practical safety tip training that goes on. And that was right at the beginning of freshman year because they're trying to be proactively combating these things.
Is that when they took away your glass bottom pants?
You can keep the glass bottom pants. You just have to use them responsibly.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's not like a Christian college.
I stand by my bold assertion that there's significantly less assault issues on Christian colleges, and that if you want your daughters to be safer, a Christian college is a good solution. I stand by it. And you stand by your notion that it wouldn't be bad if we were a little more modest.
Right. I still do believe that whoever the perpetrator is, it is 100% their fault. So I just want to make that.
Okay. We also talked about Trinity Western University in Canada. Remember that one?
Refresh my memory.
They're the ones who were trying to start a law school.
Oh, right.
And the Ontario Legal Society refuses to accredit their graduates because they're required to sign a pledge saying the only permissible sexual activity is between a man and a woman in marriage.
Right.
And because of that, they don't think they should be practicing law. So I'd asked my brother. My brother's the dean of the St. Thomas Law School in Minneapolis, which is a Catholic university, so an actual religious law school. He's the dean of a religious law school. I thought that's pretty applicable. So I asked him ahead of last week's show, if he could comment on this story, and he didn't have time because he's running a law school. And what am I? I'm just, on TV. But he got it to me like the next day. And so what he said is, because he was following it at a distance, he says, while I'm troubled by the reaction to Trinity Western University, the complication here is that lawyers act as gatekeepers to the law. i.e., if you want to undertake any number of important life endeavors, defending yourself against criminal charges, getting a divorce, starting a business, passing property on to the next generation, you need a licensed attorney. There is concern that a prospective lawyer who indicates discriminatory views will be unfit to provide full and equal access to the law. And then here's an example of this happening. Matthew Hale, an Illinois white supremacist, was denied admission to the Illinois bar based on his open advocacy of racist views. And then after that, he began committing crimes, apparently, became that kind of. So this was a case of a white supremacist who wanted to become a lawyer so they could argue their own cases if they ever get into legal trouble for what they're doing. And the bar says, no, you are a racist, you're an open racist, and you can't practice law. So that's interesting. And he goes on to say, as discrimination based on sexual orientation has become equated with discrimination based on race, the Trinity Western situation is not surprising. There's a difference between an undergrad college and a professional school that is an approved path to professional licensure. I believe that there's a distinction to be made between the environment in which the education occurs and the professional conduct of those who emerge from that environment, but that distinction is not getting traction right now in public discourse. So in other words, he's making two distinctions. One distinction is between undergrad school, open for everybody, and it is not a specific professional path to a specific professional accreditation. And then another one is law school, nursing school, a specific where you want to become one of these, and there's a whole system for making sure that the people in these professions will provide them fairly to everyone. So you're a nurse. You shouldn't be discriminatory. So you end up in a hospital someday and say, wait, he's Jewish? I'm not giving him a sponge bath. He's Jewish. It happens. Yes, it happens. So his comment was that he's not surprised that it's coming up. He also said, because I asked him further, do you have this policy at St. Thomas? And they say, no, at that level of the school, there's no pledge. You don't have to take a pledge. In fact, he said he's not aware of any religious law school in the U.S. where you are under a pledge. So it seems to be, at the grad school level, much more unusual. I imagine at Regent Law School or Liberty Law School, more likely to be a pledge. But Pepperdine, Notre Dame, St. John, St. Thomas, there's no pledge for law school or nursing school. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So.
I agree.
His point is there should be a distinction between conduct while in school and what your beliefs are when you're out of school. And he says no one is parsing it that finely.
But even if they did parse it that way, let's say you go to University of Illinois Law School and you graduate with a degree and clearly a mainline progressive school, right? It's not going to give you any kind of restrictions on your beliefs. But you graduate from that school with a law degree, but your personal belief is that marriage is between a man and a woman only. Why can't the bar ask you
figure that out,
and then at that point say you can't be licensed? What's to prevent that from happening?
That's a good question.
Because that's what happened to the white supremacists.
Basically, here they're swimming upstream. They're saying, whoop, bloop, 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 bloop. Okay, if you went to this school, it means that you probably, it's an indication of a propensity to discriminate. Therefore, we're going to shut down this school.
Yeah, but hang on a second. Are you saying that at the time that they take the bar, they ask them, and if that person says, yes,
I do not believe in marriage between
I don't like the gay people.
You're saying the bar can say,
I don't want to write a contract for the gay people.
A person can't have their own personally held belief and operate publicly?
That's my point, is when you look at what Rob said, Phil's brother.
Yes.
With the case of the white supremacists, the bar is saying we are going to determine what personal beliefs are acceptable or unacceptable for a licensed attorney. And being a white supremacist does not jive with what we want to see in a licensed attorney. So now
that's a slippery slope.
Well, that's my point. Is what happens
like
when
half of the family of Fred Phelps, the Westboro Baptist guys, are lawyers, which is why they've been so good at working the legal system in their favor. So they've all been able to get.
So when will the bar in the United States say,
I know,
you cannot be licensed as an attorney and disagree with same-sex marriage?
This is, I think what's interesting here is that effectively what seems to be coming to be true is that if you hold traditional biblical views, you shouldn't practice law in North America.
Despite the fact that many of our laws are based on traditional biblical
if you go back
views.
200 years, it would have been, if you don't hold traditional biblical views, we don't want you practicing law in North America. And basically what changed is homosexuality. It's gay rights.
Well, the thing I don't understand is the bar would never say to somebody, tell us what you believe about the nature of God. And by the way, if you're polytheistic, well, then you can't practice law in the United States. Or if you're monotheistic, you can't practice law in the United States.
That would be funny.
Essentially what they're asking is, what's your theological view about marriage? And if it doesn't jive with what we think it should be, then you can't practice law.
But shouldn't it be, what do you think or what's your opinion of laws about marriage equality?
But I think that's a different thing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Like
There's a difference between, but you may think divorce is wrong, but it doesn't mean that you can't work in a case involving a divorce.
So the school in Canada that holds to a traditional Orthodox teaching on marriage, that doesn't necessarily say anything about what the school's political or legal view of marriage is, right?
Right.
I mean, hypothetically,
well, it kind of does.
Hypothetically, someone could
they don't like it.
Could affirm a biblical Christian view of marriage and still not oppose the government sanctioning same-sex marriage. Those are two different things.
You can separate out whether you think the church should consecrate gay marriages from whether you're okay with the government establishing a category for gay marriage.
Right.
That can be two different things.
Right. So, but that's my question is...
Right.
What happened? It sounds like that whole distinction is being lost.
I think it is being lost because the gay rights movement has been so thoroughly associated with the civil rights movement, and the notion that you would oppose equal justice for African Americans based on whatever grounds, any grounds, is so abhorrent in general that by connecting the two, but you would, gays. And in some of the arguments for gay marriage that are in the courts right now, some of the judges have been poking at the attorneys arguing against gay marriage, saying, so I'm Jewish, or in the case of the cake baker specifically, they said, so I'm Jewish. What if you believed you were against Jewishness and you refused to bake a cake for a Jewish wedding? Is that what you're saying should be okay? He's black. You don't want to bake a cake for him. And so it's completely being equated with ethnicity now. Gay, ethnic, the same.
Yeah, but I actually agree with the court in that case.
I don't think that was my point. But yes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should disagree with the court or agree with the court in that case. I'm saying that they've been combined so much that now if you say, hey, our school is against gay marriage, it's the equivalent of saying you're against interracial marriage.
Well, I mean, this is probably a bad way to think about it. But is it possible for somebody to believe a religion or an ethnicity or something is inferior, but still stand for that race or religion's equal treatment under the law? Is that possible?
It should be possible.
It should be possible.
But
I don't know that we believe it's possible. Possibly because of the activity of real far right-wing groups that don't seem to if you see how the Westboro Baptists are using the law to try to get across their message and protect their message, there just seems to be so much agenda that I think people have a hard time believing it's possible.
But isn't that like what the ACLU is all about? Defending the free speech of people even when they fundamentally disagree with it, that they should still have a right to be heard and protected under the law.
But not practice law.
Well, and it's interesting, like I said, it's a slippery slope. When do we get to the point where in order to be an elected official, they start saying, well, if you hold this view, I'm sorry, you can't be an elected official.
I think that would be shortly after Texas secedes from the Union.
But you see my point? I mean... It's going to be very tricky.
Yes, in the spirit of Christians on college campuses suddenly looking like the odd men out, this article last week in the New York Times, for 40 years evangelicals at Bowdoin College, Bowdoin?
B-O-W-D-O-I-N.
Bowdoin?
You got me.
Is that a real college?
I'm not even going to speculate.
Evangelicals at Bowdoin College have gathered periodically to study the Bible together, to pray, and to worship. They're a tiny minority on the liberal arts campus, but they have been a part of the school's community, gathering in the chapel, the dining center, and dorms. After this summer, the Bowdoin Christian Fellowship will no longer be recognized by the college. Already, the college has disabled the electronic key cards of the group's longtime volunteer advisors. In a collision between religious freedom and anti-discrimination policies, the student group and its advisors have refused to agree to the college's demand that any student, regardless of his or her religious beliefs, should be able to run for election as a leader of any group, including the Christian Association. Similar conflicts are playing out on a handful of campuses around the country. Cal State, the nation's largest university system with nearly 450,000 students, on 23 campuses.
It's almost as big as the prison system.
The chancellor is preparing this summer to withdraw official recognition from evangelical groups that are refusing to pledge not to discriminate on the basis of religion in the selection of their leaders.
All right, this is what gets me. So
this one almost gets me little bunched up. My glass-bottom pants are bunched up.
I don't want to see that.
No, you don't.
I don't even want to go there. You know, when you're talking about this, I'm a visual person. I can't help conjuring up images.
You're making a sister stumble.
Yeah, really.
All right.
Or so very uncomfortable.
This another part of the article says at Vanderbilt, more than a dozen groups, most of them evangelical and one of them Catholic, have already lost their official standing over the same issue. One Christian group balked after a university official asked the students to cut the words, quote, personal commitment to Jesus Christ, end quote, from their list of qualifications for leadership. So essentially what they're saying is if you are a religious group on campus, your leaders...
You can't be religious.
You can't
as a group.
You can't require the leaders of your group to share your religious beliefs.
Right. And
that's just silly. That's just silly.
It seems silly, but it's being passed. It's coming to pass.
And what do these groups lose by not being officially recognized
by
the school?
Do you know what they lose?
They lose a key card.
It varies by campus. The students can still meet informally on campus, but in most cases, their groups lose access to student activity fee money, as well as first claim to low-cost or free university spaces for meetings and worship. They also lose access to standard on-campus recruiting tools such as activities fairs and bulletin boards, and may lose the right to use the university's names. So you can't put up your posters on the bulletin board if you're not officially recognized, and you can't be officially recognized unless you will let an atheist run for president of InterVarsity Fellowship.
Has this gone to court yet? Is any cases?
Yeah. In California, the Supreme Court upheld it.
Really?
So
which is why it's
all
going
they need
forward.
to do is just be on the ballot? Because that seems like a simple solution.
If they're on the ballot, I think there's a chance they can win.
Yeah, but see, here's the problem. No, wait a minute. But here's the problem. Let's play on a hypothetical. You have a Christian fellowship on campus, and there's an atheist group that wants to get rid of them. So they get one of their guys on the ballot, and then they have all of their atheist members show up to vote because
they are not in the Christian group, so they can't.
They can't discriminate. They can join it.
No. You can say you can't be in this group.
No, you can't.
No, that was already. They said they wouldn't do that.
And the Christian groups are saying you don't have to be a Christian to be in our group, but you do have to be a Christian to be a leader in the group.
Right. And the argument they're making is we lead Bible studies. We need to know that the person leading the Bible study actually believes in the Bible. And then the answer is, not if you want to be an official group.
So, yeah, you can basically, this is a way of getting rid of these groups.
You could take over a group, which I think would actually be a fairly common strategy to get rid of them, is let's all join that group, nominate our guy to run it.
What is this world coming to?
Here's what I don't understand.
This is the end of Western civilization as we know it.
Okay, here's what I don't understand about this, is forever, the United States government, the Supreme Court, we've had non-discrimination laws in hiring and housing and all these kinds of things. But the Supreme Court, actually as recently as 2 years ago, in a 9-0 ruling, reaffirmed the fact that religious organizations are exempt from following non-discrimination laws. Meaning, if you're a church or a religious organization, you discriminate on who you hire. You can hire people based on religion. If you're a McDonald's, you can't discriminate based on religion.
Right.
So if there's a long-standing...
If you're Hobby Lobby, you can't discriminate based on religion, which is a separate issue.
But if you're the Southern Baptist Convention...
You can.
You can.
Right.
And that's part of our law based on the First Amendment, freedom of religion. Right. Why does that not apply?
Good question,
in this case?
Because the colleges are in charge. I don't know, because they're not.
Why don't you ask your brother?
Official. I'll ask my brother.
Ask
my brother, and then we'll know.
We should have
him.
We should have him on the phone as our lifeline.
I'm going to run.
He should be the one we call.
I want to get myself nominated to be the next atheist chaplain at Harvard.
That wouldn't work.
And
we need a red phone, like Commissioner Gordon had.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
But it just goes to Rob.
My brother.
Yeah.
He wouldn't answer. He's busy.
He's working.
He's running a college.
He runs a college for a living.
What does it say about us?
What does it say? What does it say?
We sit around and talk.
It says we do not run a college.
Because we don't even try to hit the right fret.
So that is, okay, so go forward 10 years. If that keeps going, what it basically means is that Christian groups, Christian association on campus is an informal thing that doesn't actually happen on campus.
It has to go below the radar.
Yeah. It's like,
well, thank goodness there's Facebook.
We'll have to meet like in catacombs
or Twitter
underneath the city, and we'll put a secret symbol, maybe a fish or something. We'll put it on the door so our members can find the meeting.
I've been in a catacomb.
Or everyone will think the meetings are supposed to be happening in the trunks of all these cars because they have a fish on the bumper.
And I freaked out.
You're not even listening.
We're done with you. No, okay.
Yeah, I went in because I wanted to see what it would be like.
I'm making with the funny, and you're ignoring me.
I know.
They don't know what it's like because they're dead.
And when I got in there, I had a claustrophobic panic attack. Yeah. It was very scary.
So when I was a college student at Miami University,
I had to walk up the hill barefoot
in Oxford, Ohio. No.
And 2 feet of snow.
I was
5 miles each way.
I was part of Campus Crusade, which is now
Crew.
And it was one of the largest student groups on the. It was let's see, we had about 15,000 students on campus, and Crusade probably drew 1,000 to 1,500 every week. It was one of the largest groups on campus, and I can't imagine like there's just all those groups just being, oh, you can't have a space anymore. What space could they possibly meet in that isn't?
Well, it'll be like
the
Satanists at Harvard, where they have to go to a bar,
Hong Kong Cafe or whatever that was called.
Hong Kong Lounge.
Hong Kong Lounge.
Yeah, with Fred.
Right.
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
If there is an atheist group on campus, I guess that means that Christians...
How do we find them? What's their secret
Why don't we do this? Why don't the Christians then run for the atheists?
So the Christians take over the atheist groups, and the atheists take over the Christian groups, and then everyone
it washes out.
It's just all even.
I solved the problem.
Steven.
But see, we wouldn't do that because that's not Christian.
Well, of course it is.
We agree to do it.
Yeah, we just agree.
We'll take your group, and you take our group. See what we've accomplished.
And so the Christians, otherwise, they're going to be doing business as the atheists, and the atheists are doing business as Christians.
So, like humanist and free thinking groups, then have to be open to a radical right evangelical Republican running for head of the group, and if you can get enough of your friends to vote for you. It almost seems like special interest groups on college campuses have a danger of becoming meaningless, because if you're the vegans group but you can't have a vegan as your leader, you can't mandate it. It's just everything gets messy. Part of this is symbolic. A pottery group?
Part of this is symbolic because my hunch is even in the schools that have agreed to these policies, vegans are still leading the vegan group and Muslims are still leading the Muslim group. So it's probably not going to change practically, but there's a symbolic thing here where, if we're a Christian group, we have a right to have a Christian leader. And that's the principle they're standing on. And I think that applies to groups beyond Christian as well.
It does say that most of the Catholic and Jewish groups on some of these same campuses have gone along with it. They don't think it'll be a big problem.
I don't think practically it will be a big problem, but I think it symbolizes something more important.
It's a huge problem. Okay, we have one. Last week I wanted to get to another magazine cover, Time magazine. It seems like people want to sell magazines by putting outrageous things on the covers, because 2 weeks ago the cover was, we had the Rape on Campus cover, holding it up for those of you who are listening. You can't see it, but there it is. And then after that, as if that didn't get your attention, the next week was the Transgender Tipping Point, America's Next Civil Rights Frontier, with the actress on the cover from Orange is the New Black, the transgender one, who's playing a transgender person on the show and is in fact a transgender person.
That's typecasting, isn't it?
I know, that should be offensive right there. Oh, you're saying that I'm transgender and therefore should be transgender. It's like asking a midget to play the role of a midget. Oh, you're saying I'm short.
Is that an appropriate term anymore?
No, it's not.
Call me Elf. Call me Elf one more time. That was one of my favorite movies of all time.
Peter Dinklage, right?
He's become
like
the
South Pole elf.
Most successful little person ever.
He's huge, no pun intended.
He is a huge little person.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Please define transgender.
I would love to. Only I'll define it as Time Magazine defines it once I find the page.
Is that how old is that term? Is it a fairly new?
Yes, it is, because it used to be transsexual and transvestite.
Right.
Transvestite, and that's now transvestite is considered inappropriate.
Okay.
And like things like he, she male, that sort of thing.
Those are all blacklisted.
Those are now transphobic terms. Transphobic.
Okay. Educate us.
Which means you're afraid of things that cross over from one thing to another thing.
I thought it was fear of Trans Ams and the chotch balls who drive them.
Tchotch balls?
What?
I've never heard of that.
Like Joni loves tchotch balls?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Almost 1 year after the Supreme Court ruled that Americans were free to marry the person they loved, no matter their sex, another civil rights movement is poised to challenge long-held cultural norms and beliefs. Transgender people, those who identify with a gender other than the sex they were, quote, assigned at birth, to use the preferred phrase among trans activists, are emerging from the margins to fight for an equal place in society. So a transgender person is a person who self-identifies with a gender other than the one that people applied to them when they were born.
So, and how is that different than homosexuality?
Because you can be...
That's not same-sex attraction.
You can be a gay man and still say, I'm a man.
Yes. You can be a transgender woman... Wait, that would mean you're a man that became a woman, and you can still like women. And it looks like you're gay, but you're not. You're transgender.
Wait, say that one more time.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, do you have to have do you have to be surgically altered to be transgender?
No, that's part of the process, and part of where this has public policy implications is that many trans activists want a reassignment surgery to be covered by insurance policies.
What they're distinguishing is that there's a difference between your sex and your gender.
Yes.
Because sex is about body parts and genes. Gender is about...
Here's how they define it.
This is so confusing.
You're just a simple girl from Mississippi.
I am. I'm just really confused.
Welcome to the big city, darling. Understanding why someone would feel that way requires viewing sex and gender as two separate concepts.
And I didn't even read the article.
Sex is biological, determined by a baby's birth anatomy. Gender is cultural, a set of behaviors learned through human interaction.
Okay,
so you
that's
only know
just
you're
not
a girl.
True.
You only know you're a girl because people taught you how to be a girl.
If I was to look up gender if I was to look up gender in the dictionary, it is not going to say that.
That's because they're transphobic.
Hold on. But there is something important here that should be acknowledged.
What's that?
Yeah,
okay. Male and female as sexes are very simple to identify for the most part, right? So you know which bathroom to walk into when you see the little logo on the top. But gender, meaning masculinity and femininity, is really a spectrum because there's some people who are way on the extreme of masculine, and then there's other men.
And then there's Sky and I.
Speak for yourself, man. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the distinction. Is
We're metrosexual.
Just because your body is male, your gender or your masculinity may not be... It's not. It's a spectrum.
See,
does that make sense?
I think that is parsing words because I think gender and sexual gender means you have the physical anatomical.
That's sex.
They are one.
You're saying they're synonyms.
They are synonyms.
Understanding why someone would feel that way requires viewing sex and gender as two separate concepts.
Okay.
Did you hear me say that part?
Exactly. So what they're saying is they are one concept, but in order to agree with me, you have to agree.
Well,
it's like the whole faith definition. That's what they're doing. They're trying to do the same thing Peter Boghossian does.
Yeah, it's wordsmithing for
Yes.
political gain. Here's that we know that, well, first of all embryos start out female.
Yes.
And then based on how different hormones wash through the system, some become male. Some embryos fail to distinguish fully physically. And there are literally babies born where you would say, I don't know which one this is.
Right.
I had a case like that when I was a hospital chaplain.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I didn't actually.
What were you called upon to do?
Well,
Why were you even there?
Hey, what? So I was in training for hospital chaplaincy, and the team, every person would pick one night a week where they would stay all night at the hospital in case there was any emergency stuff going on. So it was my night, and I got a call from labor and delivery. And when you're a hospital chaplain, you never want to call from labor and delivery because it's never
sad.
good, right? So the nurse told me that this baby had just been born with ambiguous genitalia, and parents are freaking out, and they might want you to come up. So I'm like, okay, let me know what happens. And I don't.
You didn't cover that?
I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm just praying, they didn't actually...
You're praying that the genitalia can become less ambiguous by the time you get there?
Just some level of wisdom, this is not stuff you prepare for in seminary. So they ultimately did not call for me to come up that night. But the next
because you weren't in the hospital anymore.
The next morning, I gathered with the other chaplaincy students and our supervisor, and what we would usually do is talk about cases that came up the previous day, and it's a way of training. And so I told everybody about the call I got, and so we went around the table to talk about, okay, what would you have done?
What would you do?
And it was a very diverse group of chaplains. So we had some Roman Catholics, we had some mainline liberal Episcopalians, we had some evangelicals. And one of the more liberal people in the program said, well, she said she would have advised the parents to raise the child gender neutral. Until the child was old enough.
That's what the Swedes now do with all children.
To pick their gender. And part of, all right, I get the initial idea there, but the English language has no neuter pronoun.
Right.
Personal neuter pronoun.
That's why they've made one in Swedish.
Right. It's he or she. It doesn't apply because that's not for people. So you can't even use language without assigning a gender.
You just name them Pat and always call them Pat. Pat.
There's actually a person like that at Culver's that I can never tell. And it's very disconcerting because I don't know. I don't know. I just want to call her Pat or him Pat.
Yeah. Do they not have a name tag?
Yeah, and I think it's something like Pat.
Oh, man.
And I feel like I'm in a Saturday night. I honestly, several times, have felt like I was in a, hidden camera.
Now, this is changing because it used to be called...
Well, that's a good example of a difference between gender and sex. Because that person probably has a sex, but you're not sure about their gender.
I'm also not sure about their sex.
Well, but they have one. What you got to do is find out what bathroom they walk into.
They also have a gender. It's just, I don't know which one it is.
Well, that's my point, is sex is easy to identify, at least anatomically, and gender is not as simple.
Hey, children, do you know how many people this affects in America?
No clue.
It's one half 3 right here.
1/2 of 1%. 1/2 of 1%.
1/2 of that means not a lot.
Not a lot, but that actually seems like a lot to me. Which means if you have 200 people in a small church, there should be one transgender person in that congregation. If you have 1,000 kids in a high school, there should be 5 transgender kids in that high school. That actually seems like a lot. But it says, according to a recent survey by Public Religion Research Institute, 65% of Americans say they have a close friend or family member who is homosexual, but only 9% say they have one who is transgender, which is why there's much less visibility for transgenderism.
Right.
But that even seems high, that 10% know a transgender person. Maybe they're all thinking of Pat at Culver's.
Is a hermaphrodite the same thing?
No.
No.
What is that? Why are you laughing at me?
No, I'll tell you when you're older.
No, that's the scenario that I faced with that baby that was born.
Well, that's what I thought.
That's both.
But that's an
genitalia.
anatomical ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Where the actual...
But... So you're saying that a transgender person is clearly a male or a female,
yes.
But they don't want to be.
It's someone who believes they are a woman born in a man's body or a man born in a woman's body.
And I'm asking you, I have heard homosexuals describe themselves that way.
Then they're transgender,
how is it different?
Not homosexual. Homosexual just means that you're attracted to the same sex. It doesn't mean that you think you're the wrong sex.
Okay, I can get that. I'm with you on that one. So that means then, if I'm a girl and I am born in a male-looking body, but I'm actually anatomically a girl.
Wait a minute.
Okay, so...
You're saying you're a girl, but you're born in a man's body.
But you're anatomically a girl.
No, okay. So I'm anatomically...
It's like those Russian dolls. They just...
I'm anatomically a girl. I'm anatomically... Okay, stick with me.
I'm a kitten.
Stick with me. I'm anatomically a girl.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay? But I feel like I feel male on the inside.
Yes.
Does that mean I like girls or does that mean I like boys?
You could go either way.
Well, it doesn't always line up.
It doesn't always line up.
So, but then it's a separate issue.
I think a lot of times if you are a girl in a man's body, you're probably attracted to men, right? Even though you have a man's body, but you're female in gender. In gender, then you're going to appear to people as a homosexual man, a gay man.
That's what I'm.
But that's not
getting at.
always the case.
Right. And that's the sad story of Chastity Bono.
Right. That is a very sad story.
It's not that sad, but I mean, it's a little bit, because she was a girl who was, but felt that she was really a boy, so was living as a lesbian and had a girlfriend / wifey kind of a thing, and then said, no, I really, really think I'm supposed to be a boy, so she became Chaz instead of Chastity. Chaz Bono started taking some of the hormones, did hormone therapy, became much more aggressive, actually became more masculinized because of hormone therapy, because that's the point. And his girlfriend didn't like him anymore.
Right.
Because his girlfriend still considered herself a lesbian,
right,
and was not attracted to Chaz now that Chaz had facial hair and was acting. Chaz actually said, I actually started to feel kind of like a jerk, like I could be a jerk. and his girlfriend agreed.
I think what was so sad
is
that it just destroyed her body and made her very uncomfortable and sad. And
well, that's common in a lot of these cases.
Yeah.
At least a dozen other states besides Maryland have instituted policies that allow students to play on the sports teams that align with their gender identity. Often after a panel confirms that they've demonstrated habitually living in that gender. This is where it's coming into public policy. My son thinks he's a girl and he wants to be on the girls' basketball team, not the boys. My daughter thinks she's a boy and wants to go out for the boys' wrestling team.
This is a very slippery
and
confusing
in the state
slope.
of California, they're now allowed to do that if they have demonstrated that they really have, that they're not faking it.
But doesn't that create? Wasn't there a runner in the Olympics?
Yes.
Who was from one of the African countries, I forget, and she competed as a woman, but later there was genetic testing and proved that genetically she's a man, and she was very large and very muscular.
And I think that's different at a competitive level. What we're talking about is, grade school, high school.
Yeah, but it does create. Typically, men are bigger, more muscular, stronger. That gives you an advantage in a sport where you're. So they're saying gender should trump your physical sex in determining what sport teams you're part of.
This is part of us wanting to define ourselves. I want the freedom to define myself as a beautiful cheerleader. I want to go out for the cheerleading team, and
You'd be adorable.
Wouldn't I be adorable?
You would.
But we're having a harder and harder time finding an external moral framework that would allow us to say, no, you can't. And that's where the Southern Baptists come in.
Well, I was about to ask you, why do we care about, why is this now a moral issue we're discussing on this show?
The Southern Baptists just had their annual convention. Did you know that? And they like to pass resolutions. They like to pass lots of resolutions.
How effective have they been, really?
Highly effective at passing lots of resolutions.
Yeah, but the resolutions themselves.
So last week they passed a resolution affirming that gender identity is determined by biological sex and not by one's self-perception. The resolution was titled On Transgender Identity, and it explicitly opposes gender reassignment surgery and hormone therapies, but also says we shouldn't bully or abuse transgender people. So,
okay,
why do we need to care at a denominational level?
Can I back up for a second
about transgenderism?
Please.
So I was years ago. I was on a radio program, a Christian radio program. I was calling in, and they were interviewing me about I don't know what. Oh, it was on consumerism because it was on my first book, Divine Commodity.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about the desire impulse in our culture, and everybody wants to self-actualize through their purchase and all that. And then we go to a radio break, a commercial, and I can hear the commercial on the phone, and it's from some Christian cosmetic surgeon, and it's all about, hey, you know what? If you're gonna feel better about yourself, if you get that breast enhancement, or if you're you should do it. God wants you to do that. And I'm like, this is amazing because this is exactly what I'm talking about. But my point is, in the church, or at least in popular Christianity, we tend not to frown upon people making those kinds of augmentations to their bodies if it's going to make you feel better about yourself.
Right.
And that's the same logic that transgender people say, well, if that's okay, why can't I go a step beyond that and have sex reassignment surgery.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. What are the transgender community feeling? You know, you were talking about how they're poised to now make all these changes or want all these changes. What are they wanting us to know or do differently than we are now?
It would be these kind of policy things that transgender kids shouldn't be discouraged from changing gender, supposedly, or living as the gender. Basically, that no one should be discouraged from living as the gender you feel like you are.
And so, like, that runs into trouble where you're talking about the bathrooms at school.
Yes, there are cases on using bathrooms at schools, that kids aren't being let to use the bathroom they want to use as opposed to the one they were born to line
what happens
with.
when you're 18 years old, born male,
Yeah.
you consider yourself female, and you go to college, and you're assigned a roommate in a dorm.
You go to a really liberal school where it's a free-for-all. Nobody even cares. Woo!
Well, I think ultimately...
I'm rooming with a monkey.
I mean, how would you feel if your daughter goes to college
the monkey's gay?
And it turns out that her roommate is actually a boy?
You're not in a good territory right now. I just want to stop you. Let me just say, I think ultimately, clearly, the most important takeaway from this conversation is that as believers, we don't treat them any differently than we treat anyone else. And
I really had to ask myself, because I understand with gay marriage. Now, you're wanting to redefine an institution that's central to church life. That's probably worth a really serious conversation, and probably, you know, and denominations need to take a position on that. Transgenderism, a girl wanting to live as a boy, seems less central than gay marriage. It seems a little more peripheral. I don't know how it affects the Southern Baptist denomination if some women live as men.
I think there's this anxiety, though, and I understand it to a degree, where as a society, so many of the things that we used to take for granted as agreed upon definitions are slipping away. So we can no longer agree on what marriage is. We no longer agree on, in many ways, what's life and what's death, or what's human and what's
up and what's down.
What's up, what's down, what's human, what's a person, what's not a person. And now we're going so far as to say, well, we're not even sure anymore what's male and female.
Right.
Everything is up for grabs. And that causes a lot of anxiety. And what binds a society together is agreed upon definitions and values.
Right.
And fewer of those things are binding us together as a culture. And I think an argument could be made that ultimately what does bind us together are economic values. And that's
He's back to that.
Really it is. But as you lose all these others, the only thing that keeps us together, and that's scary to me, because it leads to really bad things.
Well, you know, I keep going back to what Oz Guinness said when he was on our podcast back in the very beginning.
Yes, he said, yes, I do have an accent.
He did say that, but he also basically said we are living in a time, I think, like Aquinas was living in. Right? Isn't that what he was talking about?
Augustine,
yeah, where the civilization is beginning to crumble.
Yeah, it depends on how you define crumbling.
Yeah, it does depend on how you define crumbling. But
because if your great-great-grandparents were slaves, you might think, well, things are better now.
No, I'm talking about
150
economically,
years ago.
And I'm talking about if you look back at all these civilizations that no longer exist, why don't they exist? Things happen. Things were changing. Yeah,
because we beat them.
Yeah, because we triumphed.
That's not true. They imploded because of a lot of different reasons.
They were overrun by Goths. And that's happening in our high schools today. Our high schools are overrun by...
All right, you're back down that track.
By Goths.
You better back that one up.
Do you think you're a girl? Or do you think you're a boy? Do the Southern Baptists have to weigh in on this? Oh boy, can't we just say, hey, gender is a little confusing, because you can't be ambiguous in a genetic sort of sense. So there is some ambiguity there, and I think...
And there's truth to that issue.
Maybe that's okay if we love and we don't expect everyone to fit into the glove of he, she, it, her, it's a monkey. I don't want a room with that monkey in Bible college. Because monkeys have low views of Scripture. and I don't want you to be on my lacrosse team if you are not clearly human.
Lord, help this man. Amen.
You know, as I started out the show, I said you do the best you can, and you just don't worry about it. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next week.
If we're back.